Yeah, so to answer your question, 14 years.
14.
I started thinking about these issues in 2009, and I co-organized a big conference at Columbia in 2010 with Frederick Samama with the title Long-Term Investing and Sovereign Wealth Funds. And that's when the climate change topic emerged as a topic that's of great relevance to long-term investors. Anyway, I don't want to get carried away.
It's a very important. You've been thinking of this for a long time.
Yes, and so now let me turn to the title of my presentation, Climate Finance at a Crossroads. So climate finance has been around, and it's met with choppy waters the last few years. So that explains the title. But let me jump in the interest of time. Let me begin with the promise of climate finance. What financial markets can do is two things. The first thing is they can provide incentives. And the short entry point into the incentive question is how investors are pricing risk. And to the extent that companies are more exposed to climate risk, and here I have in mind climate transition risk, the more investors will demand compensation for holding that risk. And this has already begun to materialize in capital markets. So with my co-author, Marcin Kakprosik, we have found very robust evidence of what we refer to as a carbon premium, meaning that the cost of capital for companies with high carbon emissions has gone up. And this is a phenomenon that has become more important since the Paris Climate Agreement. So incentives are a big part of the role of capital markets. And of course, the other big role of capital markets is financing. That's typically what people have in mind when they think of finance in relation to climate. And there, the news is less good in some ways. Too little attention has been paid to the question of how do we channel funds to green investments. So there's been a bit of a emergence of funding through bond markets with the green bonds, and a little bit of an effort through green lending by banks, but this still represents a very tiny proportion of these capital markets. And what I want to highlight here is more where we need to go, and where, what the ambition is. And what I want to highlight is a fairly recent initiative called the Just Energy Transition Partnership. This is something that was introduced at COP26 in Glasgow. And it's the embryo of a model for climate finance at scale for emerging markets. So the idea is, the question is, how do you channel money where it is, it's in rich countries, towards investments where they're needed, which is in emerging market countries for the green transition. And the basic idea is what you want to do is you want to tie financing to decarbonization. So you want to use development of renewable energy not as an addition to existing energy capacity, but as a replacement of fossil fuel energy. Why is that a winning formula? Well, because if you condition financing to the phase out of fossil fuel operations, mainly coal, we have in mind coal-fired power plants and other coal operations, then you are essentially helping to finance decarbonization. And decarbonization, that's a public good for the world. It creates benefits for the rich countries. And you can do, so we have a recent policy brief, a Bruegel policy brief that is highlighted here. Almost half of the social benefits from decarbonization can be assigned to rich countries. And this is enough of a benefit to make it worthwhile for these countries to help finance renewable energy development, to phase out coal-fired power plants. And this is what the analysis we give. It should be something that really should be scaled up. And we give some examples in the policy brief, but I don't have time to elaborate. But the key point you want to keep in mind is that roughly what's involved, so this is all based on blended finance. What does blended finance mean? It means you have a private funding component, but you also need a public component. There's just not, these projects are not generating enough of a return to be able to be funded fully by private capital market. And roughly, the breakdown is between 10% or 25% of public money is what's needed. And if you do the calculation, you know, how much does that represent to phase out coal operations in all coal operations in emerging markets? I should say we are excluding China from this calculation. Then you end up with a relatively modest fiscal burden for G7 and EU countries. Is of the order of 0.13 to 0.25% of GDP. That is a very affordable burden, and obviously the benefits are enormous. So that's the promise, but as I said, we've entered choppy waters in the last 2 years, and there are limits. Now, climate finance is often associated with what's called ESG, environmental, social, and governance goals. And ESG as a label, investment label, has lost some of its luster in recent years, primarily because of concerns over greenwashing, and these are obviously important concerns. There has been some outflow from ESG funds in the last year, primarily in the US. And there has been a very politicized context, rising context in the US around so-called anti-woke capitalism. A few days ago, we had a very major decision by Supreme Court going against a landmark case doctrine for administrative law, the Chevron doctrine, which is seriously undermining the efforts of agencies like the Environmental Protection Agency in trying to regulate climate change and environmental protection. Coupled with that, the energy crisis that emerged from the invasion of Russia of Ukraine, and this has generated in the last 2 years monster profits for energy giants. And basically, you see a photo here. The photo, for those of you who don't know, the man in the middle with the tie, that's Larry Fink. He's the CEO of BlackRock. And he's being photographed here having concluded a major deal in the Middle East on investments in some fossil fuel related investment. So basically the investor community has been dithering, and that's really unfortunate because this is the reality of climate change we're facing. Basically, the Paris Agreement set a goal for the world, avoiding temperature increase from pre-industrial levels, average temperature increase of no more than 1.5 degrees centigrade, well, guess what? We've already breached that level. This was unanticipated. Scientists are totally surprised by this. So, you know, it is getting much more urgent than it's ever been. So this led me to think about what happened in the last year. So last year we had a really very optimistic panel here at the Luohan Academy on the role of digital economy in helping the carbon transition. And we had lots of really good examples of where digital economy, digital technology can help in reducing carbon emissions in the economy. So we highlighted the role of the circular economy and how digital technology can enhance the circular economy. And one of the most obvious showcases of the promise of digital technology is what happened in the COVID lockdowns. The COVID lockdowns were much less severe than anticipated. Why? Well, because people could continue interacting online. And GDP loss was much less severe than anticipated. Yet, carbon emissions declined substantially, 7%, thanks to that switch, if you want, somewhat forced switch to a more digitalized economy. And then we gave examples of the role of the move to cloud computing and how cloud computing is very energy efficient. So that was all good. Last year also Alibaba showcased its Scope 3 initiative, using the platform to help businesses decarbonize. So that was all good. But what a year does is incredible. We're in a very different world, with 1 year having passed. And what has changed in this 1 year has been the topic of this conference this year, is the emergence of AI, and in particular, generative AI. Here I have a quote from many of you will know the name Ray Kurzweil. So this is if you want, the promise of AI. It's articulated in a very powerful way. Let me read you the quote. He says, "The singularity, which is a metaphor borrowed from physics, will occur when we merge our brain with the cloud. We're going to be a combination of our natural intelligence and our cybernetic intelligence." That fits with all the sessions we've heard so far on AI. Yeah? There's a problem with that, though, which hasn't really been much emphasized at the conference so far, and that is that AI is very energy intensive. And here you have a really interesting paper you see here that highlights which types of AI are particularly energy intensive. And you can see image generation, summarization, text generation. These are the hot new tasks, and they are really putting us under pressure when it comes to energy consumption. Here are the forecasts. These are somewhat old. As you can see, this has to be revised. Forecast of the IEA on global electricity demand from data centers, AI, and cryptocurrencies. If anything, we are above the red dotted line. Basically, we're going to, by the end of in the next few years, we're going to double our demand for global electricity coming from AI. And what does that mean concretely? Well, there's a very insightful article recently in the Wall Street Journal. This was about Georgia. Georgia has been attracting a lot of data centers, and Georgia is already at full capacity in terms of electricity supply. And here, let me read you the key sentence from the article. Georgia's main utility, Georgia Power, has boosted its demand projections 16-fold and is pushing ahead on a hotly contested plan to burn more natural gas. That's the situation we're in as of now with the development of AI. This is an article from 2 days ago highlighting how Google's emissions have jumped, again, because of the rise of AI use. So what, I know my time's almost up, so what is this all, what's the bigger picture here? The bigger picture is that innovation, you have to understand innovation by itself cannot be a sufficient solution to address the climate change problem. Because innovation, this is an old idea, it goes back to Jevons, it's called the Jevons paradox. Innovation generates more demand generates more energy consumption, and you've got to be mindful of that. And in fact, I've done some research that shows that if you look at all the green innovation that's happened in the last 15 years, and you measure it in terms of the patent filings, and you ask, what has it done to reduce emissions? And the short answer is, there's no evidence of any emission reduction coming from green innovation anywhere to be seen. So that's the point. Green innovation is a necessary condition, obviously, for the carbon transition, but green innovation is far from sufficient. We need to work on coordinating adoption of green technology in the ecosystem. We need to control rebound effects, and we need to avoid increased scope 2 and 3 emissions. So here's the point, right? There's a rising demand of rising sales of electric vehicles in China, yeah? But what's the point of driving an EV if electricity is produced through coal-fired power plants? That's the dilemma we're facing today. So much more policy intervention is needed. And in effect, I mean, one last point, we need a green industrial policy to supplement what the market is doing.